My daughter sold my house while I was sitting in a doctor's waiting room. Not a joke. Not a misunderstanding. By the time my phone call ended, my lake house, my car, and 40 years of memories were already gone. And the craziest part? She told me about it like she was talking about the weather. But what my daughter didn't realize that day was that her 72-year-old mother still had one move left. And when she found out about it, her perfect little plan was going to fall apart. My name is Grace Whitmore, and until 6 months ago I thought I had a pretty simple life. I lived in Charleston, South Carolina, in the same quiet neighborhood my husband Robert and I had moved into back in 1981. We raised our daughter there. Watched the streets fill with kids riding bikes. Watched the oak trees grow taller every year. Robert and I were married for 48 years. That's long enough to build 1,000 tiny routines. Morning coffee together. Saturday grocery trips. Sunday drives just to look at the water. When you spend that many years beside someone, life doesn't feel like separate pieces anymore. It feels like one long story you're writing together. Until the day the story suddenly stops. Robert died 6 months ago. Heart attack. One minute we were sitting at the kitchen table eating toast and talking about the weather. The next minute, everything changed. After the funeral, the house felt different. Too quiet. Too still. You don't realize how much sound another person adds to a home until it's gone. That's when my daughter Emma started visiting more often. She's 43 now, married to a guy named Daniel. Emma would stop by with groceries. Help me organize paperwork. Ask if I needed help with bills or insurance forms. At the time, I thought she was being a good daughter. A caring daughter. Looking back now, I realize she was doing something else entirely. She was studying my life. Learning my routines. Figuring out what I owned. And figuring out how to take it. But I didn't know that yet. The moment everything started falling apart came on a Tuesday morning. I was sitting in a doctor's office waiting room for a routine checkup. The place smelled like disinfectant and cheap coffee. Some daytime talk show was playing on a TV in the corner while a few other patients flipped through magazines. My phone buzzed inside my purse. I pulled it out and saw the caller ID. Emma. I smiled. Hey sweetheart, I answered. There was a short pause. Then she said something that immediately felt strange. Mom, I don't have much time. Daniel and I are flying to Spain tomorrow. Oh, I said, surprised. That's sudden. Yeah, we booked it last minute. Her voice sounded distracted, like she was packing while talking. Then she casually added something that made my stomach drop. Oh, and by the way, I sold the lake house. And your SUV. For a second I thought I misheard her. You, what? We needed the money, Mom, Emma said quickly. Flights, hotel, some investments Daniel's working on. You know how it is. No. I did not know how it was. That lake house wasn't just property. It was 40 years of memories. Robert and I bought that little cedar cabin on Lake Murray after saving for 7 long years. We skipped vacations. Worked extra shifts. Saved every spare dollar. But the moment we finally got the keys, it felt like a dream. Summer mornings fishing off the dock. Emma learning how to swim. Robert grilling burgers while country music played on the porch. Every Christmas we spent at least a few days there. It was part of our family. And now my daughter was talking about it like it was an old piece of furniture. Emma, I said slowly, trying to keep my voice steady. You can't sell my house. Well, technically I already did, she replied. My heart skipped. How? Oh, relax, she said with a small laugh. You signed the paperwork months ago. Then it hit me. 3 months earlier Emma had brought over a stack of documents. She said they were insurance updates after Robert passed away. I trusted her. I signed them. I didn't even read them carefully. Anyway, Emma continued, I'll send you pictures from Spain. Emma. Click. She hung up. Just like that. 43 years of raising my daughter ended in a 30-second phone call. The waiting room suddenly felt colder. Someone coughed across the room. A nurse walked past with a clipboard. The world kept moving like nothing had happened. But my entire life had just changed. My daughter thought she had taken everything from me. What she didn't know was that the very next phone call I received that day was going to destroy her entire plan. Because while Emma was packing for Spain, a lawyer in Charleston was about to tell me something about those papers I signed. Something my daughter never expected. When my daughter hung up that day, she thought the story was over. She believed she had already won. The lake house was sold. My SUV was gone. And I was just an old widow sitting in a doctor's office with no clue what had happened. But what Emma didn't know was that someone else was about to walk into my life that afternoon and say 7 words that would change everything. Mrs. Whitmore, I think you've been tricked. After Emma hung up, I sat there in the waiting room staring at my phone like it might suddenly start explaining things. It didn't. A nurse eventually called my name. Mrs. Whitmore? I stood up slowly and followed her down the hallway. The appointment itself barely registered in my mind. The doctor talked about blood pressure and medication adjustments, but my thoughts were somewhere else entirely. All I could think about was those papers Emma mentioned. You signed the paperwork months ago. My stomach twisted every time that sentence replayed in my head. 3 months earlier Emma had shown up at my house carrying a folder full of documents. Just some paperwork after Dad passed, she said. Insurance updates. Property records. Legal stuff. At least that's what she told me. I remember sitting at the kitchen table while she flipped through the pages. Just sign here, and here, and here. I trusted her. Why wouldn't I? She was my daughter. By the time my appointment ended, my head was pounding. I walked slowly to my car in the parking lot, gripping my purse tighter than usual. The drive home felt longer than normal. Charleston traffic crawled through the afternoon heat, and every red light gave my thoughts more time to spiral. Had I really signed something that allowed Emma to sell my property? Was that even possible? When I pulled into my driveway, something immediately felt wrong. A silver sedan I didn't recognize was parked along the curb. For a moment I just sat in the car staring at it. Then the front door of my house opened. And a man stepped outside. He was probably in his early 50s, wearing a navy suit and holding a leather briefcase. Definitely not someone I knew. My first thought was that Emma had sent him. Maybe another surprise. Maybe something worse. I stepped out of the car slowly. Can I help you? I asked cautiously. The man walked toward me with a polite smile. Mrs. Grace Whitmore? Yes. He extended his hand. My name is Michael Carter. I'm an attorney here in Charleston. An attorney. That word immediately made my heart beat faster. I tried calling earlier, he continued, but it went straight to voicemail. I was at the doctor, I said quietly. Well, he replied, glancing down at his briefcase, I'm glad I caught you at home. We need to talk about some paperwork filed this morning. My stomach dropped. What kind of paperwork? He studied my face for a moment, as if deciding how much to say right there on the driveway. Do you mind if we sit down inside? I hesitated for a second, then nodded. A few minutes later we were sitting at my kitchen table. The same table where Emma had asked me to sign those documents. The same table where Robert and I had eaten breakfast together almost every morning for decades. Mr. Carter opened his briefcase and placed a thin stack of papers in front of me. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said carefully, "a property transfer was finalized today for a cabin on Lake Murray." My chest tightened. The buyer's bank flagged the transaction because of something unusual in the ownership history. "What kind of unusual?" I asked. He slid one document closer to me. "According to these records, the property was transferred to your daughter, Emma Whitmore Hayes, 3 months ago." That lined up exactly with the day she had brought those papers. "But here's the strange part," he continued. "You never sold it to her." "No," I said quickly. "Of course not." He nodded slowly. "Instead, this document claims you gifted the property to her." My heart sank. A gift. That explained everything. If Emma legally owned the house, she could sell it any time she wanted. Mr. Carter tapped another page. "However, there's a problem." I looked up. "What problem?" He leaned back slightly in his chair. "The signature on this document is being questioned." My pulse quickened. Questioned? The bank's fraud department believes it may have been signed under false representation. I blinked. "I don't understand." He folded his hands on the table. "Mrs. Whitmore, I think someone may have tricked you into signing something you didn't fully understand." My throat felt dry. "Are you saying my daughter committed fraud?" Mr. Carter didn't answer immediately. Instead, he said something that made my entire world shift again. "Let's just say, this situation may not be as final as your daughter believes." I stared down at the documents on the table. Emma thought she had already taken everything from me. But according to the lawyer sitting across from me, the fight might have just begun. And what my daughter didn't realize yet was that she had made a mistake far bigger than selling a house. Because if what Mr. Carter was suggesting was true, Emma wasn't just greedy. She had committed a crime. And later that evening, when the lawyer showed me the exact paper my daughter had tricked me into signing, I noticed one small detail that changed the entire case. That afternoon, my kitchen table turned into something I never expected. A crime scene. Not the kind with yellow tape and flashing police lights, but the quieter kind, the kind where a single piece of paper can change everything. Attorney Michael Carter carefully spread the documents across the table while I sat there trying to process what he had already told me. According to the records, 3 months ago I had gifted my lake house to my daughter Emma. And because of that so-called gift, she had legally sold the cabin earlier that morning. Just like she bragged about on the phone. The problem was, I never meant to gift anything. Mr. Carter slid one document closer to me. "Take a look at this." I adjusted my glasses and leaned forward. At the bottom of the page was a signature. My signature. Or at least something that looked like it. "Do you remember signing this?" he asked. I studied the paper. The words blurred together for a moment while I tried to remember that day 3 months earlier. Emma had come over with a folder full of paperwork. She said it was insurance documents after Robert's death. Property updates. Legal housekeeping. All boring stuff that nobody likes dealing with after a funeral. I remembered sitting right here at the table. Emma flipping through the pages. "Just sign here, Mom." Then another. "And here." Then another. "Last one." At the time I didn't question it. Emma had always been organized. Responsible. Good with paperwork. Or at least, that's what I thought. "I remember signing something," I said slowly. "But not this." Mr. Carter nodded. "That's exactly what the bank suspected." I looked up. "What do you mean?" He tapped the page with a pen. When large property sales happen, banks often double-check the ownership chain. In this case, the fraud department noticed something unusual. What? The document transferring the property was filed extremely quickly. How quickly? Less than 24 hours after the sale was arranged. That sounded strange even to me. Is that bad? It's suspicious, he said carefully. He flipped to another page. And there's another issue. I felt my stomach tighten again. What now? The notary's signature. He pointed to a small stamp near the bottom corner. This document claims it was notarized at a law office downtown. I leaned closer. The name of the office was printed clearly beneath the stamp. But something about it looked odd. Mr. Carter continued explaining. Whenever a document like this is notarized, the notary must verify the identity of the person signing it. That makes sense. In other words, he said, you would have had to appear in person. I frowned. I've never been to that office. Exactly. Silence filled the kitchen for a moment. The refrigerator hummed softly in the background. My mind kept circling the same thought. Emma knew that. She knew I hadn't gone downtown to sign anything. Which meant. Are you saying the notary is fake? I asked. Mr. Carter shook his head. No. The notary is real. Then how? He held up a hand. We're still figuring that out. I leaned back in my chair, feeling suddenly tired. Raising a child is supposed to mean teaching them right from wrong. Teaching them honesty. Teaching them respect. But somewhere along the way, something had gone very wrong with Emma. Did she break the law? I asked quietly. Mr. Carter didn't answer right away. Instead, he said something that made my pulse quicken again. Let me ask you a question first. Okay. Did anyone witness you signing those papers 3 months ago? I thought back to that day. Emma sitting across from me. The stack of documents. The pen in my hand. And then suddenly something clicked in my memory. Yes, I said slowly. There was someone else in the room. Mr. Carter leaned forward. Who? Emma's husband. Daniel? I nodded. He was standing near the kitchen counter the whole time. Mr. Carter scribbled something in a small notebook. That could matter. How? Well, he said carefully, if Daniel knowingly watched you sign documents under false pretenses, that could make him part of the fraud. The idea made my chest tighten. Emma wasn't alone in this. Her husband had been involved too. I stared down at the paperwork again. My own daughter had tricked me. Her husband had watched it happen. And together they had sold something that meant more to me than money ever could. The lake house wasn't just wooden walls. It was Robert teaching Emma how to bait a fishing hook. It was birthday cakes on the porch. It was 40 summers of family memories. And now strangers owned it. Or at least, that's what Emma believed. Mr. Carter gathered the papers into a neat stack. There's one more thing you should know, he said. What's that? The sale hasn't fully cleared yet. My head lifted. What does that mean? It means the bank froze the final payment while the paperwork is reviewed. A small spark of hope flickered inside me. You're saying, the sale might not go through? He nodded slowly. It's possible. For the first time that day, I felt something other than shock. I felt anger. Cold, steady anger. Emma thought she had taken everything. But maybe, just maybe, she had moved too fast. Mr. Carter closed his briefcase and stood up. Mrs. Whitmore, he said, before this is over, there's something you should prepare yourself for. What? He looked at me seriously. If the investigation proves what we suspect, then what? You may have to take legal action against your own daughter. The words hung in the air like a storm cloud. I had spent 43 years protecting Emma. Now I might have to fight her. And deep down, I had a feeling this situation was about to get even worse. Because later that night, while looking more closely at the document Emma tricked me into signing, I noticed one tiny detail that made my hands start shaking. Because hidden in the corner of that document was a date that proved my daughter had been planning this betrayal long before my husband even died. That night, after attorney Michael Carter left, my house felt quieter than usual. The kind of quiet that presses against your ears. The sun had already dipped below the trees outside, and the kitchen lights cast a soft yellow glow across the table where the paperwork still sat. I hadn't moved it. Part of me didn't want to look at those documents again. But another part of me, the stubborn part Robert always joked about, needed answers. So I made myself a cup of tea, sat down at the table, and pulled the top page closer. The same document Emma claimed I had signed willingly. The one that supposedly gifted my lake house to her. I adjusted my glasses and started reading more carefully. Line by line. Word by word. Most of it was legal language I barely understood. Ownership transfer. Voluntary property conveyance. Grantor and grantee responsibilities. It all blurred together. But then my eyes landed on something that made me stop. A small printed line near the top of the page. Document preparation date. I leaned closer. The date was clearly printed there. And the moment I saw it, a chill ran through me. Because the date was October 14th. That didn't make sense. Robert died on December 3rd. Nearly 2 months later. Which meant this document had been prepared before my husband passed away. Before anyone was talking about property transfers. Before Emma started coming around more often. Before she started offering to help with paperwork. My fingers tightened around the edge of the page. Emma hadn't created this plan after Robert died. She had started preparing it while he was still alive. I sat back in the chair, staring at the paper. For a long time I didn't move. Memories started replaying in my mind. Emma visiting for dinner that fall. Asking casual questions about the lake house. How often do you and Dad go up there now? Do you ever think about selling it? At the time, those questions felt harmless. Just normal conversation. Now they sounded different. Now they sounded like research. My tea had gone cold by the time I heard my phone buzz again on the counter. For a moment I didn't want to answer it. But when I checked the screen, I saw a number I didn't recognize. I hesitated, then picked up. Hello? Mrs. Whitmore? The voice was male. Yes? This is Tom Alvarez from Charleston First Bank. I believe you spoke with our fraud department earlier today through attorney Michael Carter. My pulse picked up. Yes, that's right. Well, he said carefully, we're still reviewing the property transaction involving your Lake Murray cabin. I glanced back down at the papers. Did you find something? Possibly, he replied. The word hung in the air for a moment. Can you explain? I asked. He took a breath. There's a transfer request attached to the sale documents. It instructs the bank where to send the final payment once the buyer's funds clear. Okay. Normally the money would go directly to the property owner. That would be Emma, I said quietly. Yes, he replied. But the account listed for the transfer doesn't belong to your daughter. I blinked. What do you mean? The account belongs to a joint investment fund. With who? Another pause. Then he answered. With Emma Hayes and Daniel Hayes. Her husband. Of course. I shouldn't have been surprised. But hearing it out loud still made something inside my chest tighten. Emma hadn't just sold my lake house. She had already planned exactly where the money would go. Straight into an account she shared with her husband. "Mr. Alvarez," I said slowly, "has the money been transferred yet?" "No, ma'am." I felt a small wave of relief. "The transaction is still frozen while we investigate the ownership paperwork." "Good." But then he added something else. "However, there's another complication." Of course there was. What kind of complication? "The buyers have already moved forward with the purchase process." "What does that mean?" "It means they've started preparing to take possession of the property." My heart sank again. Even if Emma's fraud was proven, this situation was about to get messy. Very messy. After I hung up the phone, I sat there staring out the kitchen window. The night air had cooled, and the streetlights outside cast long shadows across the yard Robert had spent years taking care of. 48 years of marriage. And in less than a day, my daughter had nearly erased one of the most meaningful parts of it. But now I knew something Emma didn't. Her plan had cracks in it. Big ones. The bank was investigating. A lawyer was involved. And that strange date on the paperwork proved she had been preparing this long before she ever brought those documents to my kitchen table. Which meant one thing. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't desperation. This was premeditated. Emma had planned it. And if she had planned this much already, there was a good chance she had taken more than just my lake house. I slowly gathered the papers and stacked them neatly. Because tomorrow morning I was going to meet Mr. Carter again. And this time, I was going to ask a question I hadn't even considered yet. What else had my daughter taken from me without my knowledge? And the next morning, when my lawyer checked my financial records, we discovered a withdrawal that had happened just 3 weeks earlier. A withdrawal I never made. The next morning I woke up earlier than usual. Sleep hadn't come easy. Every time I closed my eyes, I kept seeing that date on the document. October 14th. Proof that Emma had started planning everything long before Robert died. By the time the sun came up over the trees outside my kitchen window, I had already made 2 cups of coffee and barely touched either one. At 9 o'clock sharp, attorney Michael Carter pulled into my driveway again. He walked inside carrying his briefcase and a small stack of folders. "You look like you didn't sleep much," he said gently. "I didn't," I replied. I showed him the document I had studied the night before and pointed to the preparation date. He leaned closer and adjusted his glasses. Then he nodded slowly. "That's interesting." "Interesting?" I said. "Michael, that document was prepared 2 months before my husband died." "I see that. So Emma planned this ahead of time." "It certainly suggests that." He took a few notes, then looked up at me again. "Mrs. Whitmore, before we go any further, there's something else we should review." "What?" "Your financial records." I frowned slightly. "My bank account?" "Yes." "Why?" He opened one of the folders and slid a printed statement across the table. "Because when fraud involves property transfers, there are often other financial movements happening around the same time." I looked down at the statement. It was from my personal checking account. The one Robert and I had used for years. "What am I looking for?" I asked. Michael tapped a line halfway down the page. "There." I leaned closer. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Then I saw the number. $18,500, cash withdrawal. My chest tightened. "That's impossible." Michael raised an eyebrow. "You're sure?" "I've never taken that much cash out of my account in my life." The withdrawal had happened 3 weeks earlier. I tried to think back. What had I been doing that day? Doctor's appointment? Grocery shopping? Visiting Robert's grave? Whatever it was, I knew one thing for certain. I had not walked into a bank and taken out nearly $20,000. Where was this withdrawal made? I asked. Michael checked the statement again. At a branch downtown. My stomach dropped. I wasn't downtown that day. That's what I suspected, he said. He flipped to another page in the folder. This withdrawal required an in-person identification check. In other words, someone had to show an ID. My heart started beating faster. You're saying someone pretended to be me? It's possible, he replied carefully. I leaned back in my chair, trying to process it. Selling the lake house was already bad enough. But this? This meant someone had physically gone into a bank pretending to be me. Michael continued scanning the documents. Actually, he said slowly. What? There's something else. Of course there was. What now? He turned the statement so I could see another detail. The withdrawal slip included the name of the teller who processed it. Banks keep security cameras at the counter, he explained. My eyes widened slightly. So there's video. Exactly. For the first time that morning, I felt a spark of hope. If someone had walked into the bank pretending to be me, there was a good chance the camera had captured their face. Michael closed the folder and looked directly at me. Mrs. Whitmore, I think we need to request that footage immediately. Yes, I said without hesitation. He nodded. I'll contact the bank today. I stared at the statement again. Emma had already admitted selling the lake house. But she had never mentioned anything about my bank account. Which meant one of two things. Either she thought I would never notice, or she thought I wouldn't do anything about it. For 43 years I had tried to give my daughter everything she needed. Support. Love. Opportunities. And now I was sitting here discovering that she might have stolen from me. Not just emotionally, but financially. Michael stood up and gathered his papers. I'll update you as soon as the bank responds, he said. Thank you. As he walked toward the door, he paused. There's one more thing you should prepare for. What's that? If Emma and her husband are involved in this withdrawal. Yes? This situation may turn into a criminal investigation. The words sat heavy in the air after he left. Criminal investigation. Those were words you expect to hear on the news. Not in your own kitchen. Not about your own child. But deep down, I was starting to realize something painful. The daughter I thought I knew might not exist anymore. And if Emma really had walked into that bank pretending to be me, then she had crossed a line that couldn't be ignored. I spent the rest of the afternoon sitting in the living room looking through old photo albums. Emma as a little girl. Emma learning to ride a bike. Emma blowing out candles on her 10th birthday cake. I kept asking myself the same question. When did she become this person? But by evening, another thought had started forming in my mind. Emma believed she had already taken everything from me. But she didn't know about the investigation. She didn't know about the frozen money. And she definitely didn't know about the bank cameras. Which meant the next time we spoke, she might accidentally tell me more than she intended. And sure enough, later that night, my phone rang again. Emma was calling. And during that call, my daughter said something that made it painfully clear. She had no idea the bank cameras might have recorded exactly who withdrew my money. That evening, just after 7, my phone started ringing. I didn't even need to check the screen. Something in my gut already knew who it was. Emma. I let it ring for a moment while I finished setting my tea on the coffee table. Then I picked it up. Hello? Mom. Emma's voice sounded cheerful, almost excited. The same tone she used when she was a teenager calling to tell me she'd passed a test or gotten tickets to a concert. But this time, the excitement in her voice made my stomach turn. "Hi, Emma," I said calmly. "So, did you get my message yesterday?" she asked. I leaned back in my chair. "Yes," I replied slowly. "About the house." "Oh good," she said quickly. "I was worried you might have been upset." Upset. That word almost made me laugh. "My house was sold without my permission," I said. "Of course I'm upset." There was a short pause. Then Emma sighed like I was being unreasonable. "Mom, it's not like you were using it much anymore." That sentence hit harder than anything else she had said so far. Not using it. As if 40 years of memories were some unused storage unit. "That cabin was your father's favorite place," I said quietly. "Well, Dad's gone," she replied bluntly. The words hung in the air. Cold. Sharp. For a moment I couldn't speak. Emma continued talking, completely unaware of the storm building on my side of the phone. "Look, Daniel, and I just needed the money right now. And you signed the paperwork anyway. You told me those were insurance documents." "They were legal documents," she said defensively. "You should have read them." That was the moment something inside me finally shifted. For 43 years I had protected my daughter. Defended her. Made excuses for her mistakes. But listening to her now, I realized she didn't feel guilty. Not even a little. She believed she had done nothing wrong. "So," she continued casually, "we're flying out tomorrow morning." "To Spain," I said. "Yep. 2 weeks." She sounded proud of it. Like this whole situation was just part of a fun adventure. "And when you come back?" I asked. "Well, Daniel has some investment ideas." Of course he did. Emma lowered her voice slightly. "You know how the market is right now. That cabin money is going to grow fast." Cabin money. The way she said it made my chest tighten again. That wasn't cabin money. That was Robert's retirement savings. Our summers. Our family memories. But Emma wasn't finished talking. "Oh, and Mom. I forgot to mention something." "What's that?" "We also moved some of your savings recently." My fingers tightened around the phone. "My savings?" "Just temporarily," she said quickly. "It's part of the investment strategy." The room suddenly felt colder. "How much?" "Relax," Emma said with a small laugh. "It's only about 18,000. There it was. The exact number Michael Carter had shown me that morning. $18,500. Emma kept talking, completely unaware of what she had just confirmed. "We'll put it back after the investment matures," she said. I stared at the wall across the room, where an old photo of Robert and me still hung. Emma thought I didn't know. She thought that money had disappeared without a trace. "So you withdrew it from my bank?" I asked carefully. "Well, Daniel handled that part," she said. Another pause. "But it's basically the same thing." Basically the same thing. Pretending to be someone at a bank counter. Taking their money. Emma didn't even seem to realize what she was admitting. "And how exactly did Daniel withdraw it?" I asked. "He used your ID copy from the paperwork folder," she said casually. My heart skipped. "Emma." "What?" "You do realize banks have cameras?" Silence. The first real silence of the entire conversation. For 3 long seconds Emma didn't say a word. Then she laughed nervously. "Well, yeah. But nobody checks those unless there's a problem." I almost felt sorry for her in that moment. Almost. Because she had no idea a problem had already started. The bank was investigating. A lawyer was involved. And somewhere inside a Charleston bank vault, there was probably a video recording of whoever stood at that counter pretending to be me. Emma cleared her throat. Anyway, Mom, we have to finish packing. Our flight's early. Of course, I said. We'll talk when we get back, okay? Sure. Love you. The word sounded automatic. Like something she said out of habit. Good night, Emma. The call ended. I slowly lowered the phone and sat there in silence. Emma had just confirmed everything. The money. The withdrawal. Daniel's involvement. All of it. And she had done it without realizing the investigation had already started. But the most important part of the conversation wasn't what she admitted. It was what she didn't know. She didn't know the bank cameras might have captured Daniel's face. She didn't know the house sale money was frozen. And she definitely didn't know what Michael Carter was about to tell me the next morning. Because when my lawyer called the bank for that camera footage, he discovered something that made this entire situation even worse. Because the person standing at the bank counter that day wasn't Daniel. It was someone I never expected to see. The next morning, I woke up before my alarm. The house was still dark, and the quiet felt heavier than usual. I had barely slept. Emma's phone call from the night before kept replaying in my mind. She had admitted moving my savings. $18,000. Just like the bank statement said. And she casually mentioned that Daniel handled the withdrawal. At the time, she sounded completely confident. Like there was no way anyone could trace it back to them. But that confidence didn't last long. At 9:30 that morning, my phone rang. It was Michael Carter. I answered immediately. Good morning, he said. You sound serious, I replied. I just spoke with Charleston First Bank. My pulse picked up. And? They pulled the security footage from the day the withdrawal happened. I sat up straighter in my chair. So, someone went to the counter? Yes. And the camera caught them? It did. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then I asked the question that had been sitting in my mind all night. Was it Daniel? There was a pause on the line. Long enough that I knew the answer wasn't simple. No, Michael said finally. My heart skipped. If it wasn't Daniel, then who was it? That's the strange part. What do you mean? The person who withdrew the money was a woman. I blinked. A woman? Yes. That didn't make sense. Emma told me Daniel handled the withdrawal. Unless. Was it Emma? I asked quietly. Another pause. Then Michael answered. No. The room suddenly felt very still. If it wasn't Daniel and it wasn't Emma, I said slowly. Then who? Michael exhaled softly. That's what surprised us. He lowered his voice slightly, like he still couldn't quite believe it himself. The woman at the counter was identified as Claire Whitmore. The name hit me like a sudden gust of cold wind. Claire Whitmore. I hadn't heard that name in years. Claire was Robert's niece. My husband's brother's daughter. She used to visit us when she was younger. Family barbecues. Holiday dinners. But after Robert's brother moved to Arizona, we lost touch. I hadn't spoken to Claire in almost a decade. What was she doing at my bank? I asked. That's exactly what we're trying to figure out, Michael replied. My mind raced through possibilities. Emma knew Claire. Of course she did. They were cousins. They had even spent summers together at the lake house when they were teenagers. Do you think Emma asked her to do it? I said. It's possible. Michael continued explaining. The bank confirmed Claire showed an ID and signed the withdrawal slip. Using my name? Yes. My chest tightened again. Claire must have known what she was doing. Banks don't just hand out that kind of cash unless everything looks legitimate. Did the bank call the police? I asked. Not yet. Why not? Because technically we're still investigating the property transfer first. Of course. Everything kept leading back to that document Emma tricked me into signing. Michael continued. There's another detail you should know. What is it? The bank teller who processed the withdrawal remembered something unusual. My fingers tightened around the phone. What? She said Claire wasn't alone. Who was with her? Michael hesitated. That part wasn't captured clearly on the camera. So someone else was there? Yes. Standing where? Near the entrance. My mind immediately went back to Emma's phone call. She said Daniel handled the withdrawal. Maybe he hadn't gone to the counter himself. Maybe he had sent someone else. Someone who looked less suspicious. Someone connected to the family. Claire. The more I thought about it, the more it made sense. Emma and Daniel planned the whole thing. Claire walked into the bank pretending to be me. And Daniel waited nearby to make sure everything went smoothly. 3 people working together. 3 people who thought they had found the perfect way to take my money. But their plan had one problem. They never expected the bank to question the property sale. Which meant the cameras were never supposed to matter. Michael, I said slowly, what happens now? Well, he replied, the bank has documented the footage. And if we move forward legally, that video becomes evidence. Evidence. Against my daughter. Against her husband. And against someone else in the family who had helped them. I looked around my quiet living room. Family photos still lined the shelves. Emma as a child. Robert smiling beside the lake. Memories that once felt warm. Now they felt different. Like pieces of a story I hadn't fully understood until now. Mrs. Whitmore, Michael said gently. Yes? I think we're looking at something bigger than just a property dispute. How big? If Emma, Daniel, and Claire all participated in this. He paused. That's organized fraud. The word echoed in my mind. Fraud. Committed by my own family. But the worst part wasn't even the money. The worst part was realizing how carefully they had planned everything. Except for one thing. They never expected the investigation to reach Claire. And once Michael Carter started looking into her involvement, he uncovered a connection that made this situation even darker. Because Claire hadn't just helped Emma and Daniel once. She had been involved in another scheme before this one. And when my lawyer told me what Claire had done 2 years earlier, I realized my daughter might have learned this kind of betrayal from someone else in the family. The moment Michael Carter mentioned Claire's name, something in the back of my mind started stirring. Not a clear memory. Just a feeling. The kind of feeling you get when a puzzle piece suddenly looks like it might fit somewhere you hadn't considered before. After we ended the call, I sat quietly in the living room for a long time. The house felt unusually still. Robert used to joke that our place was never truly quiet because the old wooden floors always creaked somewhere. But that morning, even the house seemed to be holding its breath. I kept thinking about Claire. The last time I had seen her was at a family reunion nearly 8 years earlier. She was always charming. Quick with jokes. The kind of person who could walk into a room full of strangers and make friends within 10 minutes. But Robert used to say something about her that stuck with me. She's smart, he once told me. Too smart sometimes. Back then, I thought he was just teasing. Now I wasn't so sure. Around noon, Michael called again. I found something, he said. What kind of something? It's about Claire. I leaned forward in my chair. Go on. I did a background check on her after the bank confirmed her identity. And? She was involved in a legal dispute 2 years ago. My stomach tightened. What happened? Michael explained that Claire used to work as an office manager for a small construction company. 2 years earlier, the company accused her of manipulating internal payment records. Did she steal money? I asked. Not exactly, he replied. What does that mean? She redirected a payment that was meant for a contractor. Where did the money go? Into an account she controlled. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. How much was it? Just under $12,000. My fingers tightened around the phone. What happened to her? The company filed a complaint, Michael said. But Claire returned the money before the case reached court. So she avoided charges? Yes. That explains something I hadn't understood until now. Claire knew how systems worked. She knew how paperwork worked. And apparently, she knew how to move money without getting caught. At least most of the time. Do you think Emma knew about that? I asked. It's possible, Michael replied. Emma and Claire had been close when they were younger. Sleepovers. Summer vacations at the lake house. Even after Claire moved away, they still talked occasionally. Which meant Emma might have known exactly what Claire was capable of. Michael, I said slowly, what if Claire didn't just help them? What do you mean? What if she taught them how to do it? There was a quiet pause on the line. That's a possibility we can't ignore, he admitted. Suddenly the whole situation looked different. This wasn't just a greedy decision. This wasn't a sudden mistake. It was a plan. A plan involving 3 people who believed they understood how to move money and property without consequences. But they had made one mistake. A big one. They underestimated how closely banks examine large transactions. Michael cleared his throat. There's another update you should know about. What now? The buyers of the lake house. My heart skipped again. What about them? They've been notified that the sale is under review. Are they angry? Confused, he said. But cooperative so far. That was at least a small relief. The last thing I wanted was another innocent family dragged into this mess. What happens next? I asked. For now, the sale remains frozen. And Emma? She still doesn't know any of this. That part surprised me. You haven't contacted her? Not yet. Why? Because sometimes, Michael said carefully, it's better to let people keep talking. I understood immediately. If Emma thought everything was normal, she might keep revealing things without realizing it. Just like she did during our phone call the night before. But before I could say anything else, Michael added one more detail. And there's something else about Claire. What? I checked her travel records. Why would that matter? Because according to the airline database. He paused briefly. Claire booked a flight yesterday. Where to? The same place your daughter is going. My chest tightened again. Spain? Yes. Emma and Daniel were supposed to leave that morning. Which meant Claire was probably on the same trip. 3 people. 3 tickets. All heading to another country. Right after selling my house and withdrawing my money. That can't be a coincidence, I said quietly. No, Michael agreed. It isn't. I stared out the living room window, watching a breeze move through the trees in the yard Robert used to care for so carefully. Emma thought she had pulled off the perfect plan. Sell the house. Move the money. Leave the country for a while. By the time anyone noticed anything, she expected it to be too late. But she had made one mistake. A mistake that was about to catch up with her faster than she realized. Because while Emma was flying across the ocean believing everything was under control, Michael Carter had just told me something that completely changed the timeline of this case. Because according to the bank records, the money from my lake house sale had already been scheduled to transfer that same afternoon. That afternoon, I sat at the kitchen table again. It felt like I had spent more time at that table in the last 2 days than I had in the last 2 years. The same place where Emma once did her homework as a teenager. The same place where Robert and I drank coffee every morning. Now it had become the center of something much darker. Paperwork covered the surface again, bank statements, legal documents, and notes Michael Carter had sent over earlier that day. My phone buzzed just after 3 in the afternoon. Michael. I answered immediately. Please tell me you have good news, I said. Well, he replied carefully, it could have been much worse. My stomach tightened. What happened? The transfer from the lake house sale was scheduled for today. I remembered what he mentioned earlier. The money from the sale was supposed to go into the investment account Emma shared with Daniel. How much are we talking about? I asked. After fees and taxes, just under $312,000. The number made my head spin. $300,000. That cabin had been worth a lot more than I realized. That's Robert's retirement savings, I whispered. Yes, Michael said gently. And Emma planned to move every dollar of it. I closed my eyes for a moment. Emma wasn't just trying to take something sentimental. She was taking the financial future Robert and I had built together. What happened to the transfer? I asked. The bank froze it. Relief washed through me like a sudden wave. It didn't go through? No. Michael explained that the fraud department had placed a hold on the entire transaction the moment the ownership paperwork was questioned. That meant the buyer's payment never reached Emma's investment account. It was sitting in escrow. Untouched. For now. Does Emma know that? I asked. No, he replied. And we're not planning to tell her yet. That surprised me. Why not? Because people tend to reveal a lot when they think everything is working in their favor. I understood exactly what he meant. Emma believed she had already succeeded. She thought the house money was on its way to her account. She thought the cash withdrawal was untraceable. She thought the 3 of them had gotten away with everything. But the truth was, none of their plan had actually worked yet. Michael continued explaining the next steps. We're preparing 2 possible actions. What are they? First, we challenge the property transfer document legally. That's the one Emma tricked me into signing. Correct. And the second? We open a formal fraud investigation with the bank regarding the cash withdrawal. I nodded slowly, even though he couldn't see me. And Claire? She'll likely be questioned once the bank files their report. The 3 of them probably thought they were relaxing on a plane right now. Maybe celebrating. Maybe talking about how easy everything had been. But the truth was already starting to catch up with them. Michael cleared his throat. There's one more development. Good or bad? I asked. That depends on how you look at it. What is it? The buyers of the lake house. My chest tightened again. Did they back out? No. Then what happened? They contacted the bank asking why the transfer was delayed. And? Michael hesitated slightly. They also asked something unexpected. What? They asked if they could speak with you. Me? Yes. That surprised me. Why would they want to talk to me? Apparently they learned the property originally belonged to you. So? They want to hear your side of the story. For a moment I didn't know what to say. Strangers. People I had never met. Now connected to this mess because of Emma's decisions. Do I have to talk to them? I asked. No, Michael said. But it might help clarify things. I looked out the kitchen window again. The late afternoon sun was casting long shadows across the yard. Robert used to mow that grass every Saturday morning. Now the thought of someone else owning the lake house we loved felt almost unbearable. But if speaking to those buyers helped stop Emma's plan, maybe it was worth it. I'll talk to them, I said finally. Good, Michael replied. I'll arrange a call tomorrow. We ended the conversation a few minutes later. I placed my phone on the table and leaned back in the chair. For the first time since this whole nightmare started, something felt different. Emma's plan was falling apart piece by piece. The house money was frozen. The bank cameras had evidence. And now even the buyers wanted to hear the truth. But what Emma didn't know yet was that tomorrow morning I was going to have a conversation that would change this entire situation again. Because when the buyers told me why they wanted the lake house so badly, I realized my daughter had unknowingly created a problem for herself she never could have predicted. Because the couple who bought my lake house weren't just ordinary buyers. One of them turned out to be a retired federal investigator. The next morning felt strangely calm. For the first time in days, I slept a few solid hours. Not many, but enough to wake up without that heavy fog in my head. Maybe it was because something had shifted. Emma believed she was halfway to Spain with $300,000 waiting for her. But the truth was very different. The money was frozen. The bank had video evidence. And now I was about to speak with the couple who thought they had purchased my lake house. At exactly 10 a.m., my phone rang. It was Michael Carter. They're on the line, he said. Already? Yes. I'm here too, so don't worry. Just tell them the truth. I took a deep breath. All right. A second later another voice joined the call. Mrs. Whitmore? The voice was calm, steady, and polite. Yes, I said. My name is David Reynolds. My wife Karen and I are the buyers of the Lake Murray property. His tone didn't sound angry. If anything, he sounded curious. I'm sorry you've been dragged into this situation, I said. Well, he replied, after hearing a little from the bank, it sounds like you might be the one who was dragged into it. That made me feel slightly better. Karen spoke next. We just wanted to understand what's happening before things go any further. So I told them. Not everything. But enough. I explained how Emma brought me paperwork after my husband died. How she said it was insurance documents. How I trusted her and signed where she asked. And how she called later to say the house had been sold. When I finished, the line was quiet for a moment. Then David said something unexpected. That sounds exactly like a fraud setup. The way he said it was so certain it made me pause. You sound like you've seen this before, Michael Carter added carefully. David gave a small chuckle. More times than I can count. I frowned slightly. What do you mean? There was a short pause. Then he explained. I spent 32 years working as a federal financial crimes investigator. My eyebrows lifted. Now Michael's reaction made sense. The buyer of my lake house wasn't just some random retiree looking for a quiet place by the water. He had spent decades investigating fraud cases. So you know how situations like this work? I asked. Oh yes, he replied calmly. And if what you're describing is accurate, your daughter made several serious mistakes. Mistakes. That word felt strange considering how carefully Emma thought she had planned everything. What kind of mistakes? I asked. David spoke with the calm patience of someone used to explaining complicated things. First, the property transfer document. The one she tricked me into signing? Yes. If you were misled about what you signed, that can invalidate the transfer. I glanced at Michael even though he wasn't physically in the room. That matched what he had already suggested. Second, David continued, the cash withdrawal. Claire did that, I said. Exactly. Using someone else's identity at a bank counter is a federal offense. I felt my stomach tighten slightly. Even hearing it described so plainly felt heavy. And the third mistake? Michael asked. David paused for a moment before answering. Leaving the country. That surprised me. Why would that be a mistake? I asked. Because when financial crimes happen right before someone leaves the country, he explained, it raises a major red flag. In other words, their sudden trip to Spain might make everything look even worse. Karen spoke again. For what it's worth, Mrs. Whitmore, we had no idea any of this was happening. I believe you, I said. We just wanted a quiet place near the lake. My chest tightened slightly at the thought. Robert loved that place so much. We hope this gets resolved fairly, she added gently. So do I. The call lasted another 15 minutes. By the time we finished, David had offered to share something else with Michael Carter. His professional opinion. A full breakdown of how investigators usually approach cases like this. When the call ended, Michael stayed on the line with me. Well, he said, that was unexpected. You're telling me, I replied. A retired financial crimes investigator buying the exact property involved in the case. I shook my head slightly. Life had a strange sense of timing. Michael, I asked quietly. Yes? Do you think Emma realizes how serious this has become? He didn't hesitate. No. And he was probably right. At that exact moment, Emma was likely sitting somewhere on a beach in Spain, believing everything had worked perfectly. But she didn't know the money was frozen. She didn't know the bank had video evidence. And she definitely didn't know the man who tried to buy the lake house had spent 3 decades helping the government investigate fraud cases. Emma thought she had escaped the consequences. But the truth was, the consequences were just beginning to catch up. Because later that afternoon, Michael Carter called me again with news I never expected to hear. The bank had officially escalated the case. And that meant something far more serious than a simple investigation. Because once the bank filed their report, the next people who wanted to speak with me weren't lawyers or buyers anymore. They were federal investigators. By the afternoon, the quiet in my house had started to feel different again. Not peaceful. Not calm. More like the quiet before a storm. I had just finished washing the dishes when my phone rang. It was Michael Carter again. His voice sounded more serious than usual. Mrs. Whitmore, I need to update you on something important. My stomach tightened. What happened? The bank has officially filed their report. With who? I asked. With the Financial Crimes Division. For a moment I didn't speak. Everything up until now had felt like a complicated family dispute. A lawyer. A bank investigation. Frozen money. But hearing the words Financial Crimes Division made the situation suddenly feel much bigger. What does that mean exactly? I asked. It means federal investigators are now reviewing the case. I slowly sat down at the kitchen table again. The same place where this whole nightmare seemed to keep circling back. Did they mention Emma? I asked. Yes. And Daniel? Yes. And Claire? All three. My chest felt tight. No mother ever expects to hear her child's name connected to something like this. Michael continued explaining. The bank provided several pieces of evidence. What kind? First, the suspicious property transfer document. That was the one Emma tricked me into signing. Second, he continued, the security footage from the bank withdrawal. Claire standing at the counter pretending to be me. And third, he said, the timing of the international travel. Emma and Daniel flying to Spain the very next day. Claire on the same flight. 3 people leaving the country immediately after moving large amounts of money. Even I could see how bad that looked. What happens next? I asked quietly. For now, investigators will review everything. And if they think a crime was committed, they'll open a formal case. The words made my chest feel heavier. This situation had gone far beyond anything I imagined when Emma made that phone call in the doctor's waiting room. But Michael wasn't finished. There's another detail they're interested in. What is it? The phone call you had with Emma 2 nights ago. My heart skipped. The one where she mentioned the withdrawal? Yes. They want to know exactly what she said. I tried to remember every word. Emma admitting Daniel handled the withdrawal. Emma casually mentioning the $18,000. Emma believing nobody would ever check the bank cameras. She didn't know the bank was investigating, I said. That's what makes the conversation important, Michael replied. Her confidence might actually work against her. If investigators heard that call, it would prove she believed the money was already gone, even though the bank had frozen the transfer. Michael, I asked slowly, do you think they'll arrest her? He paused before answering. It's too early to say. But it's possible. Yes. The word echoed in my mind long after he said it. Possible. For 43 years, Emma had been my little girl. Now she might be the subject of a federal fraud case. After we hung up, I walked slowly into the living room. The afternoon sun was shining through the window, lighting up the old photo frames on the shelves. Emma as a child. Emma graduating from college. Emma standing beside Robert at the lake house dock when she was 25. Looking at those pictures, it was hard to connect them with the person who had tricked me into signing away my home. But the truth was right there in front of me. Emma didn't just make a bad decision. She built an entire plan around deception. And now that plan was collapsing. The frozen money. The bank footage. The investigators. All of it was closing in faster than she realized. That evening, Michael sent me one last update before the day ended. Investigators had already contacted the airline. They were confirming the exact flight Emma, Daniel, and Claire had taken to Spain. Not to arrest them. Not yet. But to make sure they knew exactly where they were. Which meant something very important. Emma believed she had escaped. But the truth was, people were already watching. And when she eventually returned to the United States, she might be walking straight into a situation she never expected. Because early the next morning, Michael Carter received a message from the investigators. A message that completely changed what would happen next. Because instead of waiting for Emma to come back from Spain, the investigators had decided to do something far more surprising. They were going to call her directly. The next morning started quietly. Too quietly. I woke up around 6 and sat on the back porch with a cup of coffee, watching the sun come up over the trees in the yard Robert had spent years taking care of. For the first time in days, my mind wasn't racing. Maybe because everything that could happen was already in motion. The bank had filed their report. Investigators were reviewing the evidence. And somewhere across the ocean, Emma was probably enjoying the Spanish sun, believing her plan had worked perfectly. She thought the house money was in her account. She thought the bank withdrawal was untraceable. She thought nobody knew what she had done. But just after 8 that morning, my phone rang. Michael Carter. "Good morning," he said. "You sound like something happened," I replied. "You could say that." I leaned forward slightly in my chair. "What is it?" "The investigators decided not to wait." "Not wait for what?" "For Emma to come back." My eyebrows lifted. "What do you mean?" "They're calling her today." For a moment, I thought I misheard him. "They're calling her?" "Yes." "While she's in Spain?" "That's right." I tried to imagine Emma's reaction. She probably thought the only phone calls she'd be getting were from tour guides or hotel staff. Not federal investigators asking about financial fraud. "Do they have her number?" I asked. "The bank provided it," Michael said. "Of course they did. Emma used that number for the account connected to the property sale." "Do you know when they're calling?" I asked. "Soon." I set my coffee cup down slowly. For the past week, Emma had been living inside the illusion that everything had worked out for her. But that illusion was about to crack. Michael continued explaining. "They're not planning to accuse her immediately." "What will they say?" "They'll ask questions. Questions about the property transfer. Questions about the bank withdrawal. Questions about Claire. And questions about why the three of them left the country the day after the transaction." Even without accusations, those questions alone would make it clear something was wrong. Very wrong. "Do you think she'll panic?" I asked. "Probably," Michael replied honestly. "And when people panic, they talk," I finished. "Exactly. Emma might start explaining things without realizing how much trouble she was creating for herself." A few hours passed slowly that morning. I tried reading a book. I tried watching television. But my mind kept drifting back to the same thought. At some point today, Emma's phone was going to ring. And on the other end of that call would be someone asking questions she never expected. Around noon, my phone rang again. "Michael." "Well," he said. "They reached her." My pulse quickened. "And?" She answered. "Of course she did," I said. "She had no reason not to." Michael explained that the investigator introduced himself politely and told Emma he had a few questions about a recent property transaction. At first, Emma sounded calm. Confident. Exactly like she did when she called me from the airport. But that changed quickly. "What happened?" I asked. "The moment they mentioned the bank withdrawal." Michael paused slightly. "She hung up." I blinked. "She hung up?" "Yes." "That doesn't look good," I said. "No," he agreed. "In fact, it makes things worse." Hanging up on an investigator wasn't a crime. But it made one thing very clear. Emma suddenly knew something was wrong. Very wrong. "She'll probably call Daniel right away," I said. "She already did," Michael replied. "And Claire?" "They're all talking now." I could almost picture it. Emma sitting in a hotel room somewhere in Spain. Daniel pacing the floor. Claire realizing the plan wasn't as perfect as they thought. 3 people who believed they had escaped consequences. Now realizing someone was asking questions. But the most important part of this entire situation wasn't the call itself. It was what happened after the call. Because once Emma hung up on the investigator, she made a decision that completely changed the direction of the case. A decision she probably thought would protect her. But in reality, it only made things worse. Much worse. Because later that evening, Emma did something investigators always warn suspects not to do. She started deleting messages. Messages that might have proven exactly how she, Daniel, and Claire planned everything from the beginning. That evening, the house felt quiet again. But it wasn't the same kind of quiet I had felt a few days earlier. Before, the silence had been heavy with confusion. Now it was something else. Closure was starting to form, piece by piece. Around 6 in the evening, Michael Carter called again. His voice carried the calm tone of someone who had just received important news. "They've confirmed it," he said. "Confirmed what?" I asked. Emma tried to erase the messages. I closed my eyes for a moment. Emma had always believed technology worked like magic. Delete something, and it disappears forever. But real investigations didn't work that way. The investigators expected it, Michael continued. When someone realizes they're being questioned, the first instinct is to clean up evidence. What did she delete? I asked quietly. Messages between her, Daniel, and Claire. Planning messages. The kind that probably explained everything. When to withdraw the money. How to use my ID copy. When to sell the lake house. When to leave the country. Emma thought deleting those messages would save her. But Michael explained something she clearly didn't know. Most messaging platforms keep server records, he said. In other words, the messages still exist. My daughter had spent weeks planning a fraud. But she forgot the one thing modern investigators rely on the most. Digital trails. Did they recover them? I asked. Some already, Michael replied. And they're working on the rest. The recovered messages were enough to reveal the basic plan. Emma and Daniel needed money. A lot of it. Daniel had been struggling with a failed investment the previous year. Instead of telling me, they decided to solve their problem another way. By taking what belonged to me. Claire helped them design the paperwork. Claire withdrew the cash. Emma handled the property transfer. 3 people. 3 roles. 1 plan. And now every piece of it was starting to surface. But the most important development came later that night. Around 9 o'clock, Michael called one last time. They've made a decision, he said. What kind of decision? The investigators aren't filing charges yet. That surprised me. They're not? Not immediately. Why? Because the money never actually left escrow. That was the frozen lake house sale. And the cash withdrawal is still traceable, he continued. They're giving Emma an opportunity to resolve the situation. Resolve it. In other words, return what she took. The next morning, Emma finally called me. Not with the confident tone she used earlier that week. This time her voice was shaky. Mom. I waited quietly. Can we talk? There was a long pause between us. About what? I asked. Another pause. Then she said something I hadn't heard from her in a very long time. I made a mistake. The words sounded small. Fragile. Almost like they had trouble leaving her mouth. She told me the investigators had contacted her again. They explained the evidence. The bank footage. The recovered messages. The frozen sale money. Emma finally realized something. Her plan had never actually worked. Not even for a single day. Over the next few weeks, everything slowly untangled. The lake house sale was cancelled. The property returned to my name. The $18,000 was repaid to my account. Claire faced legal consequences for the bank fraud. Daniel disappeared from Emma's life soon after the investigation began. And Emma eventually came back home. Not to celebrate. Not to explain. but to face the damage she had caused. One afternoon, months later, she came to visit me. We sat on the back porch together. The same porch where Robert and I used to drink coffee every morning. Emma looked older somehow. Like the past few months had finally caught up with her. "I never thought it would go this far," she said quietly. I believed her. But that didn't change what happened. Betrayal has a way of leaving permanent marks. Still, she was my daughter. And life has a strange way of continuing even after the worst moments. A few weeks later, I drove up to the lake house again. The dock looked the same. The water moved gently against the shore. And for the first time since Robert passed away, the place didn't feel empty anymore. Because something important had become clear through all of this. Emma thought she had taken everything from me. My home. My savings. My memories. But the truth was, those things were never hers to take. And some things in life, like truth, patience, and a lifetime of hard work, have a way of finding their way back home.